All right, welcome to the December 18th edition of the Package Week Think Big session. Today, we're looking over our agenda. There's not too much there, a smaller group today too with the holidays and everything, but I guess I could jump right in to mine. Hey, Dan. All right, so one of the things that's top of mind, and Dan and I have been talking a little bit about lately, is our maturity level. So we have a few maturity targets that are coming up in January. So we have the package registry and the dependency proxy and Helm charts are all supposed to, package registry is supposed to move from minimal to viable. Dependency proxy is supposed to move to minimal or to viable, and then Helm charts is supposed to just move to minimal from planned. And we can make I think we're going to hit the target for the package registry. I think we're blocked for the dependency proxy on whether or not we get Puma launched. Otherwise, then we'll make it for the dependency proxy. And for Helm, I think it's going to be close. I think we could test. I can make an argument that you could push a Helm chart to the container registry now and it works and there's just some missing data. And maybe we could say that's minimal. So it's possible. But the bigger reason that I bring that up is because in the past, the way that GitLab has done the maturity targets, including these, is just like a product manager says, okay, this is the maturity target, and we're going to write these down on our direction page, and that's going to be our goals. Yesterday during the weekly product meeting, they said that we're going to move away from this, and we want to go towards the UX scorecard-driven maturity plans. And those UX scorecards are driven by the jobs to be done. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't get just that process just slapped onto us, and that we all had a time to talk about the jobs to be done and review them and talk about what's important and what does a good grade mean in a specific job to be done or job story. So I just wanted to bring that up as to create some transparency into the process. I'm thinking what we could do is have one issue that's the core issue, and then each thread of that issue could be one of the jobs to be done, and we could put in there like thumbs up, thumbs down, whether we think it's important, and then maybe we could have some other rating to say if this helps us reach a given maturity target or something like that. That's my current thinking, but I was wondering if y'all, having reviewed the initial Google Doc, have any opinions on how we can make that process easier and more transparent and more asynchronous. I'll say in my old physical office days, or we're doing project management, we would probably just like have a line on a whiteboard and then put all of our issues that are above the line reflect a certain maturity or something like that, or have some sort of like a 2x2 chart where you would sort of have like what phase maturity it helps and how good the feature needs to be. We could do something like that in Mural. That's another option. Or if no one has any opinions, I could just try something and we could go for it.
Does it make sense to use epics for this, like to collect maturity level?
So
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to use an epic. Maybe the job to be done is an epic, and then all of the job stories in that epic or sub issues in that epic. That could work.
I mean, or at least the workable one. Maybe we can promote job to be done, which is a comment to an issue, so it goes inside the epic, and then we can keep track of it. I don't know. I just
yeah,
those that come out right now.
Okay, oh, I like that. Okay, yeah, if no one has any other strong opinions, I'll try putting something together and sharing it with the team, and we could see how it works. And if it's not working, we could always change it. But that was the one thing I wanted to bring up, is just that one of our core things that we're measured on as a team is our ability to move maturity targets for each category. And so I just wanted to, and previously these maturity targets were set by me probably before most of us were here. Dan was probably here, maybe Steve was here. And so a lot of those things got put into prioritized without ever being triaged, without ever being spoken about. And I really wanted to make sure that didn't happen this time. And that we're all aware of that there's some process that's going to get, shared with us from up above. So I just wanted to make sure we were working towards the same shared goals as well. Dan, are you going to say something? I see you furrowing your brow.
Is that my tell that I have something to say?
You just got 2 Oreos.
Yeah, I guess for me, what I'm curious about is like where it is right now, so I can go and sort of look at it and get a broader overview. Do you have? I mean, I clicked on the link that you put in here already, but do you want to maybe just sort of scan through these really quickly to give people a sense of what it is for in the package stage jobs to be done?
I can, yeah. So a job to be done is based on this this book done by a bunch of PhD or MBA type folks that came up with the jobs theory. And the idea behind that is finding the motivation for why people hired you to do a certain thing. And the classic example they give is McDonald's milkshakes is like the first example they give. So they were realizing that they were trying really hard to sell more milkshakes to people, and they didn't realize why people were buying milkshakes. So in the morning, they found out when they got to asking people why, that people would buy a milkshake on their way to work because it was cold and it was filling and it would last them their whole trip commute to work. And then in the afternoon, people would buy milkshakes. They would come in with their kids and they would say, oh, well, I can't say no. I've been saying no to my kids all day. I just want to get them a small milkshake that they could finish quickly and that I don't have to bring in the car with me. And so what happened was, in terms of product design, they went and made milkshakes in the morning they made them larger. They made the milkshake itself thicker so it would last longer. And then in the afternoon, they made as small cups as possible and much thinner recipe. And in doing this, they were meeting the customers where they needed to be in terms of their why they were buying the product. So, and you could say the same thing, like why in the end, why does someone buy a Lamborghini, right? Like, is it because they need to get from spot A to spot B, or is it because they want to be seen driving a Lamborghini, or is it because they really like, Italian cars, and once you know that, you could dial in your marketing and how you design the car to those sorts of decisions. Tesla would probably be a better example. The doors are awesome on Lamborghinis. So for when it comes to GitLab, Ian and I started this exercise of why do people buy GitLab, and then specifically why are people hiring the package group or package stage to fit their needs. And initially we started out with one job to be done, which was the one I heard most often from customers. I want to replace my existing universal package manager vendor. They don't want to have GitLab and Sonotype or GitLab and JFrog, for example. And they want to solidify on one platform and only pay for one contract and not worry about 2 different implementations. So that was like an example of a reason that we've heard that our prospects and customers bought GitLab and specifically the package stage. So we tried thinking through things at that high level of job to be done. Why are people hiring us? And then for each one of those, what are the user stories that are required to satisfy that job to be done? So for instance, if you go back to the Sonotype example or JFrog example, we could say, well, we need to have a certain coverage of package manager formats. We need to have certain capabilities. We need to have the ability to help customers transition from one service to ours. They probably need to know whether or not they could do that, and things like that. And so that got translated into user stories or job stories. They're basically the same thing. The difference between a user story and a job story is a job story has a little bit more context. A user story is, I as Tim, when I'm drinking coffee, want it to be hot. a job story would be, actually that was a job story. Sorry, you add the context. It would more be, a user story would be, I as a user want my coffee in the morning so I can blah, blah, blah. And then a job story would be more specific. It would be like, I as Tim, when I am doing something, want something so I could do this. So it just adds a little bit more context, and that's why Ian and I use those a bit. Does that help on background?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that.
And so this list in the issue that I linked to includes what are these high level jobs to be done. And people have been going in and voting them on them in the Google Doc. That needs to make its way into this issue. But the high level, what I'm thinking is, when my organization decides to move forward, you need to prepare and migrate the organization's packages and images to GitLab's package and container registry. So this is all about being able to easily migrate from one service to the next. And then we have a bunch of job stories for the system administrator and for the developer. And then the next one is they needed to work reliably. So the users and developers have a consistent, stable experience. That seems pretty obvious, but that's a big reason that people want to use GitLab is the high availability and performance. Making sure that they work, that the registries are working optimally, and so they could, but not worry about high costs. So this could be, as an engineering manager, they need to know how much storage is being used. They need to have storage management features. They need to know, be able to monitor the system and things like that. More about storage management, need the tools to keep them clear and unused of clutter and keep the cost low.
Are you, Tim, sorry to interject, are you referring to the issue that's linked in the
Yeah,
agenda?
exactly. I was reading the high level jobs to be done, the bolded items.
I mean, you can, oh, I don't know if you can share that.
I can, I think it's public. But yeah, that's the idea. And so what we want to do, and then the thing that's going to happen next, one, I want to like keep the voting process going and make sure that's clear. But then Ian is going to take each one of those prioritized job stories or jobs to be done, and he'll create one of those UX scorecard issues, which will go through and it'll rate the user experience of trying to complete that job to be done. And he's done this before. When he first started, he did it for, I think, for publishing a package or building an image or something. And he goes through what step has to be done to accomplish it, and then he gives us a grade. And the idea is that we should see those grades improve over time if those are important to us. And two, that we would be able to give the idea that they're talking about now is using those scores to rate our maturity. So that's why it'll be important for us to say which jobs to be done and job stories are important, so that we're measuring, and that's like where we can have the most input. But then the scorecard will be, as Ian, and I'm assuming it's Ian and users that he's testing, will be as brutally honest as possible. So the maturity target will be driven by research instead of just saying finger in the air, I think this is what we need to cover. That was a lot of talking, and I'm sorry.
So in your head, what were you thinking would be the best way? You brought up earlier, like whether it's a epic or whether it's a issue with comments or whatever, like how are we thinking about what's the most important thing that the team can be giving you here around these jobs to be done?
I think I'm not decided yet on what the framework is. I think I'll choose one and just go with it. I'll test it myself. But what I really want to know is that, one, we think this is important or not important, like everybody on the team, and then two, what does this contribute to the next maturity level? And if so, maybe like less important, but like what grade would we have to get in order to give ourselves to reach the next maturity level? So if there's a job story that is you need to be able to migrate your packages to the package registry. At what point do we say we're a lovable product, for instance? Does that have to be an A? Or is a B suffice? And so I think having some way of grading on both importance and also like what's the threshold for the maturity level. And that'll be the trick of the process, I guess. I'm making sure that works. And I think I have an idea for it, but that'll be the next step, and hopefully that'll be coming in the next like week or two, or probably in 2020.
Do we need to identify also technical dependencies? Like we can't solve this until this other thing is solved, and maybe they are like in different maturity level.
I think that would be great. That would definitely be awesome if we could do that. But if that's, yeah, that would be great. Just having a conversation about each of them, especially the ones, if we all say it's not important, like there's some that are down there that, you know, they're nice to haves for sure, because we're trying to cover everything. We don't have to have that level of depth of conversation, but one that has like 10 upvotes and, you know, everybody's saying this is a key to having a mature product, we should try and drive those conversations. And the idea is that what comes out of that should feed into our validation track. So we're going and testing that with customers, and then that feeds into the build track. And so this is like one long process for building and launching features. Right. So I think next steps then will be I will work on just creating some. We already have them all, so I just need to make it so it's like a visual way that we could all vote and comment and everything. And I want it to be in GitLab. So I'll work on that over the rest of the week, and I'll share something out as soon as I have it.
Cool. Are you planning on putting that in issue in like GitLab.com, like inside the company project?
I think it should be. Now that I saw your comment, I think it should be public, because I want our customers and users to be able to also join the conversation. I think that'll be important. Makes me nervous because it's like such a core foundational thing, but the reality is like we're supposed to be transparent, and we want to make this available to the whole community to comment on.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve. My bad.
This might be a little like, you know, off of what you were specifically saying, but when it comes to like the idea of voting and upvoting, because like I think I mentioned in the previous issue that like I'm going to be extremely biased towards like the developer role. Like for example, if we look at the jobs to be done of like migrating packages, that's not something I'm going to ever do and necessarily. And so while I understand the importance of it, I might be biased against, you know, saying that that's, you know, less important than having certain package features available within the UI. So when it comes to the voting, is the idea to vote within the predefined like bold job to be done, vote what's most important and least important in our minds? Or is it, you know, overall? Because I feel like if we do overall, then we risk like, you know, being biased against certain jobs just because of our roles compared to roles at other companies.
Yeah, well, I think the bias is like a natural part of the product management process, because we all have some level of confirmation bias or optimism bias, or, you know, there's so many different things that can impact that. And that's why one, like Ian and I could be a filter too. Like if we see something that looks off, we could say, okay, we should think about this one too. But also that's why we push it through the validation track, because if we're all saying it's important and we're all users of the product, and then we take it through the validation track and we see like every system administrator goes, oh, I can't do anything until you have this done, so don't even bother on that stuff. That would give us a little bit different insight into the problem validation. So I'm okay with things like that bleeding in, because they should be weeded out during the interview process and the validation process. But do your best to try and be as neutral as possible.
Yeah, and I guess when I say bias, it's more of a like lack of experience in certain areas. Like for example, I have never worked at a large enterprise company that has hundreds of internal packages, so I don't really like know how that works. So I might not have as much insight into those types of features and the importance there. I think that would be more my concern. Like certain things I do understand, certain things I don't.
It does make me think that one specific, we kind of call out the job stories by role, but I think visualizing them by role could be really useful too. Like being able to see like even the stories that are developer stories, it's not just like so cut and dry that this would be a developer, this would be a system administrator. I think a lot of things exist on a spectrum. So it's like the migration probably wouldn't fall on a developer until it did, because there's probably some things you would have to do. And if you got really frustrated, then it's gonna, what's the result of that? So I think visualizing, once we have it, some visualization of like, maybe it's by role and by customer type would be really valuable. Like being able to say, yes. Yes, I agree with that.
I think that deserves an interjection, Nico.
I agree.
No, I was just saying that migrations and devs are like cat and cucumbers. We are a bit scared of those.
I think it's true. So I think that visualizing this in the end, in my mind, by at least by customer or by user type and by customer type, is a really like an interesting way of looking at it, because the needs of a small startup with 5 engineers is going to be very different than the needs of a company with 5,000 engineers. And so in the end, like visualizing that, and I think Ian has that in mind already. We've talked about that. So, but I think the first step is just to like pass through the initial vote, then do some problem validation, and then once we start talking to users about it, we could start to map those things onto that spectrum.
So the summary there was try to recognize the bias you have and account for it to the best of your ability. But there is an expected, excuse me, there is an expected bias that comes out of everyone's experience that we're hoping the validation process will help to identify and minimize.
Exactly.
I'm also wondering, like if it would be a good place, as Nico is saying, to add sort of notes on, what depends on what specifically as you work through each of those, because I'm sure that if we say, oh, we can't do A until we do B, then maybe once you do some validation, you might find out like, well, you have to do B first, but B isn't useful to anyone, or something like that. So I think it would be really helpful as we kind of do these votes to note little like dependency issues or complexity issues, so that when you do the validation track, you get some additional insight.
I think that would be great. I think that would be really useful.
I have a question still around this. Does like technical feasibility or technical complexity change? Can it change what we are going to plan in the short term? I understand it in the long term, it doesn't really matter. But can it change how we plan around the short term?
I think what we should do is, because this is leading into the validation track, not the build track, we should be open to asking the research questions, because we might find that there's a different way to implement it than the most challenging way. Like, let's say that, one of the user story X, we all think this is really valuable, but we also think it's incredibly complex. We could still validate that it's a problem talking to users or customers, but not actually implement it. Or we could figure out a way, like a path to implement it. But it's always worth calling out. I think if you're commenting on a specific one and you say, this looks like it's going to be really challenging or next to impossible, it's worth calling out, and maybe we know not to even prioritize it. If you said it's just, there's no way that this will ever happen. I went to this product conference a few weeks ago, and they were talking about different biases that product managers face. And one of my favorite examples they gave was during World War II. They were studying a lot of the planes that were coming back, like to figure out where to put more armor on the additional planes, because they would look at the bullet holes and say, okay, well, we need to put more armor on the wings and in the I don't know, like the fuselage or something. But they had this inherent bias because they were only looking at the planes that made it back. So they were adding armor to places that these were the planes that were surviving, versus like looking at the planes that had all crashed and where all of the bullets were centered in the cockpit. And so like that's a survivor bias, I think that's called, for example. So the GitLab version of that is if we're only talking to customers that love us, it's a problem, right? If we're not thinking about the customers that also fired us. Survivorship, thank you, yeah. And so it's fun to think about that stuff and to always question, are we asking the right research questions and things like that. And Ian's great at that, by the way, because he's been doing that his whole career. Yeah. Okay, anything else on that topic?
When you get to creating that issue, just friendly reminder to use the think big label.
Yep. Well, I think that's all that's on the agenda. So maybe we can give people back 20 minutes of their day. This was really helpful for me to talk out too, by the way, today, because now I think I have a better picture of how to format this and what some of your concerns and how you want to participate in this. So thank you for reviewing this today. It was great. All right, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you.